Okay, guys, episode 20. And you know, not many sort of programs like this has a guy back, for the third time, given that we had those two sessions. But what proved to be the case, as all of you will know in anticipation right now, is that Al turned out to be our most popular so far guest. And we've had some big, big names, as you know. But he dropped that great tease the last time when he mentioned life between lives. And that really excited lots of you. I know it did. It certainly excites me. But the thing about Al, before I bring him on, is he's had a massive impact on all of us, hasn't he? I mean, for me personally, but when he first talked about the toothpaste, it hasn't crossed my mouth since. I no longer use shampoo. I wash under my arms with a little bit of coconut oil. Oh my God, what a change. And you know what? Nobody near me has noticed any of this. They haven't suggested I'm smelling or I've got dirty breath or something. Nothing. It's just been absolutely fantastic. So, but the thing is, just before we bring him into, the thing about toothpaste, can you remember when we look in my childhood, there were ads on television for toothpaste all the time. And if you remember what they did was they always showed you the brush and they made sure you filled the entire brush up with toothpaste. That's what marketing people do. And of course, we all did that, didn't we? Latterly, when I, sort of before I did the thing with just using water and oil, was that I was only using a quarter of the toothpaste. I realized that was a marketing thing. And what about shampoo? Shampooing twice. That was all something they got us to do, those marketing people. But you know what they also got us to do? They also got us to believe that fat's a killer. They've also got us to believe all that other nonsense about, cows and cattle somehow or other damaging the planet. And all the other things they've been doing. But here we have a man who has, again, I keep saying it, reversed his way out of something that most people possibly couldn't even contemplate in their mind, never mind physically do it. This guy's a star. But what he's going to talk about is amazing. But before we do it, he's got some amazing news to share. So let's bring Al back to all of you. I know you're all bursting to see him again. So Al, welcome back to our little show. It's just fantastic to have you again.
So it's so exciting to be across the pond, as you say, yet it seems like you are sitting in my living room. I know I said that last time. Yeah. It's just an amazing technology. I love it. Thank you for inviting me back. This is awesome. I really love it. For some reason, I think I'm a ham here at this because I just eat it up. So yeah, a couple exciting things actually, staying in the house for a lot of reasons, especially COVID and that other stuff that's going on. And being the kind of person I am, I'm a very productive person. I want to be busy doing something that I think is productive, not necessarily financially productive, just productive, being creative. I like to create something and I love to write. So I wrote 2 little mini books, and they're mini. I mean, it's really short, and I don't like long books anyhow. It's time consuming. There's a lot of fluff in a lot of these books, but I wrote a book about the way I eat, and I'm calling it The Better Belly Blueprint, and it's on Kindle. It's only like 38 pages. How short could it be? And then my philosophy, my reasoning, the way I connected the dots about the infections and changes that occur in the gut that affect the entire body, creating chronic disease. I wrote a mini book also, maybe twice the size of the Better Belly Blueprint, and it's called Is Your Gut Killing You? And it basically talks about the gut microbiome, which I think is the center of the universe when we come to the body, and how it changes and how it affects the circulatory system and the immune system, which is the catch-all for everything. The reason that you're healthy and I'm healthy, and I am healthy, is because I've supported my immune system. You support your immune system. People that don't support their immune system get sick. 60% of the US adults have a chronic disease. 70% of deaths are caused by a chronic disease. 72% of the US population is overweight. And these are facts that are affected by a compromised immune system. So this is what the book is all about. Is your gut killing you? So those are my two biggest creations up to this point.
Well, we'll put links to them into
Super.
the show notes. That sounds elaborate, doesn't it? But we'll be there, and I'll push them again separately tomorrow, and I remind people that it's on YouTube. I mean, I think again, since before and then since you've been on, microbiome's been a fairly big thing in our consciousness, and the other thing that's been in our consciousness is metabolic health. But inevitably, how we get into all of this, or how I get into all of this, was just that rising anxiety and fear back in March, because COVID was beginning to really bust forward. What was interesting, though, was even then I was aware of alternative viewpoints from scientists and medical people. And one of the great friends of my business, Mindstore, he used the phrase, "I beg to differ." So begging to differ regarding how the mainstream is presenting this COVID thing and so on and so forth is very interesting. And I suppose when I get into it, it was just to help, because I've got methodologies that I could share for managing stress and managing particularly anxiety and fear. And then we follow this journey of coincidence, and we end up with your good self, because I hear you on the show. But it never occurred to me to talk about death and dying. Because that's one of the other, all of the obvious thing is let's survive COVID. But what about if people don't, and what happens then? And so to come kind of full circle, this is quite an amazing, coincidental, trusting the process, trusting the universe just to follow where it takes us, which I've been doing. And it was inevitable when you left us with the tease that we had to explore this. And I've always had a big interest in it. And I've got a colleague that I work with, a partner in business, who's going to do a session on it as well from a slightly different point of view. So you're kicking something off, which I don't think anybody expected when we started these shows, but it's quite exciting. So it's where do you begin? It'd be interesting just to let you wander in, and if you don't mind, if I can stop you occasionally. I don't want to do it too often, but just to ask a question, press a point. So
sure. So just like I entered dentistry in a conventional way, and I learned conventional dentistry and at my specialty in periodontics, which is the treatment of gum disease, in a conventional way. And I've done that conventionally for many, many years, and still until I saw different paths and pursued those paths to get more involved with laser procedures that were not in conventional dentistry at that point, kind of on the fringe. And so I do like to look outside of my box, right? So let me go way, way back. Maybe, oh my goodness. I was writing a newsletter for all periodontists in the United States called The Personal Report. And I think I was doing that maybe 20 plus years ago. I'm thinking actually maybe 30 years, or maybe in the as a matter of fact, it was around 1989, 1987. That's when this hurricane came to Charleston. So yeah, it's around that time. And I was doing this newsletter on a weekly basis, then it became, a monthly basis, then it became a quarterly basis. And I was writing about all kinds of things about marketing periodontics and the financial end of it. Not necessarily treating actually patients. So it was for the professional, the periodontist, to understand certain concepts that I had. And I had some individuals that sent me articles that I worked within the newsletter. And sometimes I had people that were very knowledgeable about various books or whatever, and they would recommend a book or summarize a book for me, and I would write it up in my newsletter. So this is a long story to get to a point. So there was a wonderful woman. I live on the East Coast of the United States in Charleston, South Carolina. There was somebody on the West Coast of the country, and she knew of me or whatever, and she contacted me with some recommendations for books that I would review for my newsletter. Well, she came to me and said, I have a book I want you to read. She said, this is totally different than anything I've recommended to you, and it's changed my life. Well, when a person says this changed their lives or their life, it made me sit up and think. And she said, and my first question was, I'd love to read it. What's it about? And she said, it's about reincarnation. And I said, okay. And I hesitated, and I said, you know, I got to tell you, and these are the days that I was very conventional. I got to tell you, this is not what I believe in. This is totally different from my upbringing, but you're telling me it changed your life. I'll read it. So I got it. But she did tell me why it changed her life. And she said that her son, I think he was 16 years old, died in a car accident. And she was obviously and amazingly depressed for an extremely long period of time until she read this book. And she said it gave her such comfort and knowledge about what's going to happen after a person dies that she said it changed her life. And I said, got it. I'm going to read it. If I don't think I can get through it, I will still read it. And I got the book, and it was by Brian Weiss. He's a psychiatrist, and the book is called Many Lives, Many Masters, and it was published in the 1980s or something. So it was published close to the time that I was doing my newsletters. Yep. And I think it was published in 1988. So I got the book, and I started reading it thinking, okay, this is going to be a drag, but I'm going to read this. And I could not put the book down, and I finished it in one night. That's kind of unusual for me, and it blew me away. Are you familiar with Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss?
I read the book. I haven't read it, but I've read other stuff. And
so this started my path. So Many Lives, Many Masters is a true life story of Brian Weiss, who was a psychiatrist. Yeah. And he was obviously treating patients. And one of his patients he calls in the book, and the book is totally about this one patient. He talks about this one young lady. Her name is Catherine. Yeah. And she had some medical issues and psychiatric issues. And he wanted to try to figure out what her problems were. And, you know, hypnosis doesn't cure a problem. Actually, hypnosis is more for the person, the therapist, to figure out what's going on so that they can treat the problem later on. So he asked her if she would submit to being brought under hypnosis by his guidance for him to help figure out what was going on in her life. And she obviously agreed, and he did what he had to do. And all of a sudden, during this hypnotic trance, or therapy, she started talking in a different voice, and she started talking about things that were bizarre and happening centuries ago. And he took copious notes, and he discounted it as she read a book or she saw a movie or whatever about certain elements that she was talking about. Well, he actually did some research, and what she was talking about was true. There were factual statements that she was making, and this woman, according to Dr. Weiss, was not a very intelligent woman, not like a college trained woman. She wouldn't have known more than likely these facts. Most importantly is that during these trances and what turned out to be past lives of this woman, Catherine, and she apparently had approximately 90 or 98 past lives, or 60, 68 past lives, which is quite a number. Turns out that in the middle between one life and another life, she talked in a totally different tone and told Dr. Weiss, Brian Weiss, some personal things about him and the reasons why he was privy to all this information. And that's where it gets to be many lives, many masters. So the many lives are Catherine's actual past lives. The masters are God, superior beings, whatever, presenting to Brian through Catherine the reasons why he is learning this information, to disseminate this information. And to prove that this information was true, Catherine was telling him in a different voice some very personal things about his life. One of which, and I don't remember the details, but one of which was he had a young, I think, son that died in a year or two old when he was 1 or 2 years old. No one knew that. Certainly Catherine didn't know that. And it blew away Brian Weiss. I mean, he was just amazed. And again, he took copious notes. So this is the beginning of the concept of life after death. And it was interesting, the woman that gave me the book to read and said why it was so comforting is because all of these lives presented the facts that our spirit lives, and it lives actually in a realm that is the real life entity, and we only are temporary as we're living in our mortal bodies to experience things. And we go in and out of different lives to learn different lessons, yet some of these lessons are very bad lessons. We're bad people sometimes, and bad things happen to us to learn things. And all of this is literally created by ourselves, our learning process. Now, that was not discussed in Many Lives, Many Masters. It was discussed from other books that I can talk to you about in a moment.
Yeah.
So when I read this book, I started thinking, oh my God, reincarnation sounds like it's real. And then I happen to be Jewish. I don't practice Judaism, but I am Jewish. And it turns out that reincarnation is a very strong element of ancient Judaism. And the Kabbalah, which is part of a interpretation of the Old Testament, talks about reincarnation. And this fascinated me, absolutely fascinated me. And all of a sudden, I was not really out of the mainstream. I was just picking up things that have actually been discussed and described thousands of years ago. Yeah. And I'm thinking, wow. And it was so comforting to me to understand that and believe that we are entities in a mortal body, but we are immortal. Our souls are immortal, that we are going to different realms after we leave this earth and probably come back to learn other lessons. It's a very comforting concept. I can't prove it, but it's a comforting concept. And that's what started me on my journey. And I do have a long journey with this.
So just to pick up, and again, coincidences. In my own journey to where I am, being able to talk to you and have people want to watch, about round about the same time, back in '89, I was more or less launching what I do now. And what was also happening back then for me was I got involved with an organization called the Silva Method. You may have heard of them, Jose Silva. And Jose Silva and I got a pretty special relationship, and I was working for that organization back then, or just before then. And I went off and did a 2-week training thing with them. And one of the guys that was on it, and this was in London, he came from all over the world, was a priest who worked in the Vatican. And he had just left the priesthood, and part of his sort of choices was to get involved with this movement. And I got a lot of time with him. And one of the things he shared with me, because when he was a priest in the Vatican, he worked in the archives away down in the depths of the archives with all the old books and all you can imagine. And he said, back before I think it's 909 or 908, the Synod of Nicaea, out of that came something called Nicene Creed. So back then there wasn't a Catholic church, there was just the church. And the church that back then taught reincarnation. And in 907 at the Synod, all the leaders of the church decided to no longer teach it, because they had people saying, well, if I'm coming again, he simplified it. He said, the notion was, if people are coming again, well, I'll just go out and rape, and I'll just go out and steal, and I'll just go out and murder. And he thought they needed to get control of people, so they took it away. So that's interesting. So both in your own faith and the Christian faith, there's been this history.
Yeah. Yes, that is very interesting.
Very interesting.
And of course, you can chalk it up to these are old ancient societies, and they believed in mystical things to explain what is very physically understood today. And I get that, but I don't believe that. I do believe that this is the real thing. And then, you know, Many Lives, Many Masters just started me on a journey, and the journey actually continued. I was looking into more research. I did tremendous amounts of reading, and I'll tell you a few of the books that I loved.
Yeah.
But I was introduced to the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. You're familiar with it?
Much so,
So Robert Monroe was not a medical person. He was actually a radio personality.
Yeah.
But he coined the term out of body experience, because he talked about his own personal experience of going out of body. And that term never was explained until he defined it. And he wrote many, many books about out-of-body experiences and a variety of things about what I learned from Many Lives, Many Masters. So here's another person with a totally different perspective talking about the same kind of things. So his books were kind of fascinating. And after he died, or maybe before he died, but I went to this after he had passed away, there is a teaching institute, Monroe Institute, a research institute, where you can actually go for a week's time, where you are isolated. There are only groups of maybe 15 people at a time, and you learn the ability to, it's kind of like transcendental meditation. You learn the ability of relaxation and synchronizing the right hemisphere and left hemispheres of your brain's frequency, and you can sometimes maybe have an out-of-body experience, but sometimes have an experience where you go to another realm, like you are in a past life regression type of realm. So that was fascinating. And I did that actually twice, different types of courses that they had. I never got really good experiences. I never could experience what some of the other students were feeling. And I thought, you know, I'm very resistant. I cannot be hypnotized, or I can't hypnotize myself. At least I thought I couldn't, because I'm kind of a control freak, and I don't like and I think that that's the reason why some people cannot go into a state of hypnosis. They have, you can't be hypnotized, you have to do it yourself. You can only be guided, and I wouldn't allow myself to be guided, is what I'm thinking. One of the things that I did at the Monroe Institute, this is very interesting, is we had to do like a meditation walk where we didn't speak and we just kind of walked around the mountain areas. It's beautiful in Faber, Virginia, anyhow. And I was then doing some guided visionary stuff with the group, and I was taken to, in my mind's eye, like a mountain area, and I was supposedly walking up this mountain and needed to open a door that would open up to another realm. And I couldn't open it. It just wouldn't open. And it was explained to me that it's probably some kind of suppression that would not allow me to do that, because I wasn't ready to open that door. this is interesting because this is way, way back 20 plus years ago. Fast forward, I do some more reading. I'm reading about I read two books by a guy that is brilliant, and that is Michael Newton. If you've heard of Michael Newton, he wrote about life between lives. So not so much past life experiences. He took his patients and he treated and interviewed hundreds of patients that he wrote his books about. He took these patients into their past life, but he progressed them to their death and then talked to them in this state of hypnosis of what was happening after death, but before another life. And that was the concept of life between lives. And two of his great books, The Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, are must reading. If I can tell you the best books I've ever read, those two are the best. And I started to think and understand that not only do our souls live on, but they have activity and learning between one life and another. And we actually, according to these theories, and I believe them, we actually participate in our selection of what lesson we need to learn next time around and select the person, the entity that we're going to actually inhabit. That's very bizarre. I mean, I'm going to, if conventional friends of mine are listening to this, they will turn off and they will say, I'm not talking to this kook any longer. But I got to tell you, I do feel that this is true. And because of Michael Newton's work, and he has, since he's died, there's an institute of his, and they train therapists to do past life experience regressions, in between life regressions. I wanted to experience that. So I had found a person in Charleston that actually was trained by the Newton Institute. And I did work with her twice. She was totally incapable of making things happen for me. And I knew that coming into it because I said to her, I don't think I can get hypnotized. And I really wasn't. And I thought it was kind of silly. And what she was trying to do to guide me was kind of silly. And I'm thinking, I'm totally awake and listening to what you're saying, and you're just being silly. So I kind of discounted all of this. Although I believed in it, it just wasn't happening for me. Now, mind you, remember when I went to the Monroe Institute years before that, I had to open this, door in my own mind, but I couldn't because it said, it's not time for you to see inside. So now I am looking still for another person that has more credentials to do a past life regression and life between lives session.
Well,
I found, go ahead.
When you go. Well, yeah, let me trust myself here and then we'll see where you go next.
Yeah.
It's quite exciting. A lot of people watching this will have recognized some of these things you've just talked about in stuff that I'm going to use the word played with on some of my courses. And so, for example, some will remember climbing up a mountain through a forest, finding a cave, going into the cave, wandering down the cave, finding a big cavern, and meeting someone in the cavern, then moving from the cavern and going down further and finding a chest, an ancient chest with a golden key. You open the chest, it opens and there's a gift there. Other people will have done, my methodology is based on an idea of a house across a river. It's called the House with the Red Roof. Everybody who follows me knows about this. And in latter courses, I got people to go downstairs. It's in the house. And we did past life regression with the audience. Now, what is interesting, and I've done lots of it myself, what is interesting, given what you've said about maybe not being ready for it, if that was the word you used, but it sounded like that, you're not ready to do it. What I found, I had an out-of-body experience when I was 17. I've been on this journey for a long, long time, but maybe see where it goes, because I think I think the coincidental nature of you and I's coincidences are very inspiring. There's maybe something. There's maybe something here for us both.
I don't think there are any coincidences,
No, exactly.
actually. I think
Exactly.
we are meant to do things,
Exactly.
and you
Exactly.
and I, for some reason,
I think books. I mean,
been meant to.
a book fell off the shelf for me when I was 17 and walking home from school into the bookstore, and I taught myself out of that how to do yoga at 17, and I taught myself how to meditate. And I was meditating on a candle, 17, up in my bedroom. Parents were downstairs. My two brothers that shared the bedroom were out playing or something. And I had an out-of-body experience. And it really freaked me out because I didn't know what was going on. I was up on the ceiling looking at my body. It was really weird.
Oh, wow.
And I managed to get back in, but it terrified me. I didn't go near it for years. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that I've taken people to situations where they're going to do something extraordinary with the connection to, we'll call it the universe or the source. I like to call it the source. And what I find is they can't open the door. They can't open the chest. They can't go through the space. And the reason I think is, this might help you, I don't know, but might get us into a nice conversation. I think it's because of their big left brains. If you think about your traditional training and your background, you know, what your profession was and is, big heavy left brain stuff, not so much right brain. And so people who are overly left-brained might think that what the hypnotist is saying is kind of crazy and silly, and so their left brain talks them out of it. Because what I think generally, because I've watched so many people through these things, what intuition is controlled imagination, deep in a meditative state. So you get to the meditative state, but then your left brain's still blocking. If you then realize, wait a minute, I'm just making things up here, and you allow yourself to make up, then it starts to happen. And when I've allowed myself to do that and I've been taking people through experiences, then this magic happens. But what is really exciting here, just for a moment, then I'll let you go on, is one of the underlying things that have morphed into these 20 programs I've now done is a notion that I had about living till we're 100. I call it, my brand's Mind Stores, I call it Mind Store Centurions. And one of the things, as I've been getting to gather material and write material and create stuff like I want to create, and in making sort of interesting connections that maybe there's collaboration. One of the things that's really quite excited me has been the idea of taking people to and beyond their death in deep meditation to find out what is in that mid space. So people won't be surprised about me saying that because they know I talk about this Mind Store Centurion concept, and they won't be surprised about me using controlled imagination to get places. So those non-coincidences are rather exciting. So I cut you off there, but I hope you haven't lost your flow.
No, actually, what you have said is actually the methods that have been used to help me go into a state of past life regression. Going downstairs, a variety. Stairs have been the most typical, and looking at my age as I'm going down the steps and whatever. And the blockage, I think, is very interesting because I think it's when I got to a point where I was literally visualizing opening a door. The blockage was not believing I could. The blockage is I wasn't ready to do that in the course of my life experience at that moment, because I would have seen something I shouldn't see.
Yes.
Because we know everything in spirit form, soul form, in our energy form, but we have forgotten that when we're in our mortal bodies, because if we knew everything in our mortal bodies, we wouldn't have anything to learn. So that is done on purpose, is what I understand. So I researched a person who had significant credentials that did past life experiences with Life Between Lives from Michael Newton's Institute.
Yeah.
And she was located in Florida, and I flew down and saw her. It was a 3-day session, which was quite extensive.
Yeah.
And I believe that she did help me go into a state of hypnosis. I do believe that I went into some past lives that were not very comfortable. And I still had certain blockages. And the summary with her, and this is maybe 5-7 years ago, I don't know, something like that. Her, maybe even longer than that, but her interpretation, what was happening was similar, and that is, there is something there that you are not supposed to know yet, because you have to do certain things in life before that experience occurs.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So now fast forward to September 2018, and I am living amazingly well. I am what I called the senior poster boy for a healthy lifestyle, lecturing around the country, writing, doing seminars, doing consults all around the country, and treating patients in a clinical environment for periodontics.
Yeah.
And then I am given the diagnosis in September 2018 that I have cancer. It's incurable, and I'm going to be dead in 3 to 6 months unless I do certain things.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the blow. That was the door, maybe, that I could not open decades ago, because I could not have known that. I was not evolved enough to have that knowledge, because it needed to happen now, not then. And I'm thinking, because I'm trying to remember all the things that have occurred, how everything now ties together.
Yeah.
And I have taken this door now that I've opened and have been literally T-boned with this devastating disease, but I didn't succumb to it, right?
Yeah.
I am thriving. I am an amazement for my oncologist. Now, I have certainly done to help my body to support my immune system. I do not have a cure for cancer. I cannot tell anybody I know how to cure cancer. But I think that I know how to improve my immune system, which is the essence for health. And the way to do it is through a very anti-inflammatory diet, which is my now Better Belly blueprint, basically a carnivore diet with a few other things included. Improve my gut microbiome, which is absolutely critical. Have an attitude that is very supportive and open and looking forward to greater things. I certainly am not a depressed person, never been in denial. And all of this, I think, has been what I was to learn and to disseminate maybe throughout the world. I don't know. I have been told that I am a person that is very positive, and what I tell people is very helpful to them in for those that are in states like I am in, where they're thrown into a situation where they have a terminal disease, and that there are ways to do things to get a better quality of life. Even though this disease is going to kill you and everybody's going to die, maybe have a better quality of life until the end. So this whole concept of our soul is immortal and we're only living in a mortal body to learn lessons. I think the lesson here is that I developed cancer. I did not let it get me down, and I am kicking it literally, and I'm surviving extremely well. And the way I'm doing it needs to be told to the masses.
Well, you know, I mean, the naive thing, I know it's naive, the naive thing to kind of say is the source kept you here for a reason. I mean, you were actually in a
No,
hospital.
this is exactly what I'm
Not,
thinking.
yeah,
This is
not
a
many.
purpose.
Yeah, not many people get to the hospice. I mean, people reverse out of cancer all the time. Of course they do,
That's right.
but they don't get in a hospice and reverse out very often. So the fact that, I mean, it's the obvious thing is you're here for a reason because you could have gone,
Yes.
and
Yes, I
so
could have.
so you're here for a reason, and it's absolutely fantastic that
So,
you're.
you know, when you talk about death and dying,
Yep.
I was there. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not reading a book and telling you what it may feel like to be
Exactly.
on the verge.
Yep.
I was there. I can tell you what it is to be in a hospice
Yeah. Yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
drugged with narcotics so that I'm not in pain, but still all kinds of terrible side effects. Being catheterized, which if you've never had a catheter in your body, it's the worst thing ever. And being constipated from the narcotics and having to use a bedpan and not really being able to get out of bed and not doing very much for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a devastating time. Yet, for whatever reason, I rallied. And my
Yeah.
wife, of course, I think is the element that pushed me and got me back on my
Yeah.
cancer protocols, which I couldn't do while I was in hospice, obviously, because I
Yeah.
was ready to die. And the only reason I was in hospice was because of the severe fractures all at one time.
Yeah.
Just completely broke my body.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, of course, that there is a power inside of me that allowed me to recover, and then the will to get back on my protocols to support my immune system to help my body heal. I mean, we are an amazing machine, and no matter what somebody thinks they know about medicine and the body, they are only touching the surface. We just are really ignorant people.
Yeah.
The most knowledgeable people are still ignorant. We don't know the inner workings of our body, the frequencies of our body, the ability for our cells to communicate with one another. We just don't understand that. And what we don't understand is the soul energy and its huge power, and most likely the many, many lives that it has led to create the knowledge base that it has.
There's an interesting coincidence that's drawing my attention here again. Behind you, to looking at you, I know my camera reverses every time I do this, but I don't know if yours does. But to your, I was looking at to the left of you on the wall there looks like a lion.
Yes, so it is a picture of a lion.
Yeah. And
Yes, it
so
is,
the
and
lion.
it's
Yeah.
and it's very modern interpretation of a line. So it's lots of little strokes.
Yeah.
So if you look up close, it's just a lot of little kind of splashes of color and brush strokes. But when you stand back, it's a lion. Well, I love lions. So I love lions and I love other animal type creatures, but lions are great.
The group that's going to be watching this evening are going to laugh because one of our other guests a while back, one of our own, had the line behind her as well.
Oh, really?
So this is like, to me, it's like bang, 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 big beacon stuff. The source is saying, come on, pay attention. For everybody to pay attention at this moment. And I think what if I could take the moment to say it. You've got such a rich canvas to paint on, and you've used the notion of just little splashes of color that look like a line when your brain processes them. Because if you think about it, how many people would you expect out there for someone to reverse out of a hospice on carnivore?
Yeah.
Yeah, vegan, yes, vegetarian, yes, some sort of juices, fruit juices, or God knows what, but carnivore, that enough is bizarre. Never mind the fact you've come out and you're aware of the past life thing and the future life thing. I mean, my God, what a canvas you've got to paint on here.
So, I think we talked about the story of the carnivore diet for
Yes.
me.
We have already.
And the science strongly supports an animal-based diet. And I believe we reviewed this, but I can just summarize.
Yeah.
I think to look at any subject, you have to have perspective.
Yeah.
So just you and me talking back and forth, you saw the lion behind me, I see a bookcase behind you,
Yeah.
and I don't know anything else that's going on around you in the house or outside or the roads that are being surrounding your property. But if you were in a plane and you took off, all of a sudden you could see lots and lots of things. So the perspective is you need to have a broad look. So when I talk about diet and health, and certainly vegans and vegetarians talk about this is great and that is great, people survive with this, they're looking at very, very short periods of time.
Yeah.
When you look at the perspective of human evolution, and let's say our modern humans have evolved for at least 160,000 years. Theoretically, humans have evolved for 2.5 million years, but modern humans, Homo sapiens, literally 160,000 years, and our DNA code that has evolved, there has been no evidence whatsoever in that development stage, from archaeological digs and whatever, that any species were vegetarian or vegans. All of them have been shown to be animal-based predominantly, and they have determined that basically because of certain nitrogen testing that can be done, from what I understand, in the sites of the skeletal remains, that shows the proteins coming from animal-based foods and not plant-based foods. But the other thing is the physiology of our digestive system supports a more protein-based, animal-based diet than plant-based, because we have a very acidic, the most acidic stomach acid in primates, and that's because we are eating meat and the microbes that are decaying meat. So the acid kills that. The other thing is we have an intestine that's very long. The small intestine is very long. That's where most of the proteins from animal-based products and fats are absorbed. And then our colon is very short because we don't do much digestion of plants. And when you compare it to other primates that are basically vegetarian or more vegetarian than carnivorous, they tend to have large colons. That's where the plants are digested. So our physiology of the digestive system supports an animal base. I'm not saying only animal meat. I'm saying animal base. We are omnivores. We can process everything, but we're designed to process meat-based more than plant-based foods.
Yeah.
And then the other research shows that carnivore diet actually is very, very healthy for the body.
And currently I'm on that end of the spectrum. I have been vegan and vegetarian before and blah, blah, but here I am, I'm carnivore as well, or as near as you can get. I can get back to the blank canvas, because you've got a job to do clearly, and the proof's in the pudding. I mean, you're booked out solid. You've now got books, and so on, that you hadn't written before on Kindle and so on. As I say, it's a wide canvas, because you could. People just loved listening to you the last time about the carnivore thing and your sort of regime, the whole thing about the microbiome and how you look after that in your mouth and so on. But here's this thing about, could it be that you're really here to tell us to consider how to face our deaths? And how to get freedom from death.
Let me
interrupt. In between.
Let me interrupt you about that, because it just brought to mind a book, and I cannot remember the author, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's a book about dying.
Yes.
It was recently published this year, 2020. It was written by a physician who runs a hospice hospital. Right. And he related stories from his hospice patients, because they are all dying. Yeah. And the stories are similar to the interpretations that Michael Newton wrote about when he did his 2 books, the Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, when
Yes.
he interviewed all of his clients, and he put them into states of hypnosis, and then worked with them to go beyond their death, but how they were living between lives, their soul entity. And this book talks about these patients in hospice hospitals who related their dreams to him of a variety of these types of events that they probably would never have experienced, except now they're on the verge of dying,
Yeah.
and maybe blockages are opening up and they're seeing things in the spiritual world. Fascinating stuff.
I mean, to go back for a moment, forgive me, but I'm just thinking about you in the hospice, and you're presumably in your bed in the hospice, as you said, you know, catheter. And I've had a catheter. I know what that's like. And I had
Oh God.
a kidney stone, and my God, it was unbelievable in a fresh.
Excuse me.
Go there. So the thing is, you're in your bed in the hospice. Your wife hasn't yet sort of kicked you up the backside.
Right.
Do you think because of your belief in the afterlife and the midlife experience that you were complacent?
Yes, I was ready to die. And I wasn't afraid to die because I knew where I was going. And
Yeah.
I thought this was what was meant to be.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to fight it because I didn't want anything artificial to keep me alive when I wasn't supposed to be alive. And I didn't want my main goal was not to have a decrease in the quality of my life.
Yeah.
So mind you, I had a broken right arm, a broken right femur, and several ribs that were broken on my right side. I was in quite a bit of discomfort. I thought I would never walk again. I
Yeah.
thought I would never be able to use my right arm again. And those things, with an incurable cancer that theoretically I should have died December 2018, and now it's September 2019. So it's almost a year beyond, theoretically, the time I may have died from my incurable cancer. I'm thinking, this is the time. But I wasn't in denial. I said, okay, I'm ready. I'm not afraid of death because I feel like my soul is going to move on, and this is what it's supposed to do. I learned my lesson, whatever it was, you know, cancer and how I survived or whatever, and now it was time to move on. And I was complacent, like you said. I'm ready. I didn't fight it,
No.
but circumstances changed my interpretation, because if you remember, at that time, that week, first week in September, a hurricane was coming through Charleston,
What was that?
and
Yeah.
that hurricane was such a severe, potentially severe hurricane. All the hospitals were ordered to evacuate, including the hospice hospital. They had no place to send me, and my wife said, okay, I'll arrange to get a hospital bed in the house. We got the hospital bed. They transported me to the house. Now, at the house, I was in hospice. I was still in the catheter. You know, I had a catheter and everything else. And I had a nurse that was coming in from hospice to take care of me.
Yeah.
But it was an opportunity for my wife now to kind of shake me psychologically and said, you know, you're not a victim, you're a survivor. You did so well until this accident, this crushing accident which caused the bone damage. It wasn't because my protocols weren't working. I just broke my bones. And so we got back on the protocols. She forced me to get back on my protocols. Eventually, we got a physical therapist and worked with me. Eventually, the catheter comes out, and I wean off, which is very difficult to wean off narcotics, by the way.
Yeah.
I weaned off of these narcotics. Withdrawal was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And eventually, within weeks now, it wasn't months, just within weeks, I was walking and could see my oncologist at the hospital where I was being treated for the cancer. Previously, I could see him, and he actually helped me to go further forward. And the story is, May of 2020, I have a new PET scan, and it is clear of all cancer cells throughout my body. Now, PET scans are not
No, no.
completely accurate, but it tells a story that I never could rely on before because all of the other PET scans were positive. This was totally negative. So it's been quite an exciting journey. And I don't look back on it and say, gee, I wish this didn't happen, or I wish this didn't occur. Definitely my entire life stopped in the normal progression in September 2018 because all my goals were ended. My clinical practice of periodontics, I couldn't treat patients any longer, and I can't treat them now because my right arm, even though it's healed, it never was set, so I have difficulty with my right arm. I can function, but I can't do treatment with patients
Yeah.
with my right arm. But I'm not regretting where I am. I think I'm much better today than I was when I thought I was the senior poster boy for a healthy lifestyle. I think I have learned a tremendous amount, and that's really what spurred me on to write these two more mini books, because my concepts have evolved even better. I was eating healthy, exercising healthy, doing all these things before my cancer diagnosis,
Yeah, yeah.
thinking that it was healthy, but not really understanding what it could do for my immune system. The immune system was, I knew of the immune system, but I didn't really understand the immune
Yeah,
system
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Now I believe that all of this has congealed to literally teach me what I have done to heal my body is because I have really supported my immune system.
Okay. So I've got some big questions, and we have time going
Sure.
on. Do we have a time challenge, or you need to go?
Not for me. I have the next 8 hours for you.
The audience would.
As long as I can take a potty break later on, I'll be okay.
Oh, okay. Well, they won't mind me continuing, I don't think, because they just love you. Let me ask a question. They'll forgive me for asking this question, but given that your wife challenges you, let's just be kind and use that word, right? And you get to where you are now. What I'm interested in, to what extent was that push and pull? Did she push you, or was the quality of your vision of what you could do with the extra years pull you out of it? Or were you pushed out, were you pulled out, or was it both?
Well, I think it was both, but one came from before the other, and I think
Yeah.
that my wife was the factor. But I think the hurricane was really the factor, because my wife couldn't have done this at the hospice hospital,
No.
because
Yeah.
all the circumstances were there for me to stay drugged with a narcotic, stay with the catheter,
Yeah.
literally decline in a hospital bed to the point where my organs would have eventually stopped. On the other hand, coming to the house, needing a nurse and living in a different environment, it was better situated. My wife was better situated to get the message to me. And once she got the message to me, I started thinking, okay, you're right. Let me get off of these narcotics, which is which are making me foggy in the brain and uncomfortable and constipated and all that kind of stuff. And once that started to happen, then I knew that I never was in denial, and I certainly was not in denial, and I saw I could recover. And as soon as I knew that I could rally, especially once that catheter was out and I started to get out of the hospital bed, then I had the motivation to really move fast. And I think it happened that way.
I think that's a great share, because a big word in my sort of thing is the word expectation, right? So if you're in a hospice, everybody expects the patient to die.
Right. And they were dying right and left around me.
The whole
Yeah.
process is let's help you die peacefully and all that.
Yes.
Whereas at home, you've got a completely different dynamic going on. Your wife wants you to live.
Right.
And it's a different expectation. And you gain confidence very quickly, and look what you did. So that's amazing. But I suppose the big question that people would want me to ask is, given your investment in reading so much and going and doing those consultations and doing going off in the retreats and stuff, and all the things you've done, and getting so close. I mean, maybe days from death. What do you think happens? I mean, what do you
When we
think or
die?
hope happens when that journey finally comes and you're ready to step
Oh,
down?
I totally believe that we experience death,
Yeah,
meaning our bodily functions stop.
yeah,
Our soul, our energy source, leaves our body, which is what actually came into our body when we were in a fetus
yeah,
situation,
yeah,
leaves our body and progresses on to the spiritual realm. That is an educational process, a relearning process, a more than likely a evaluation of what we did in our current life and all of our previous lives. Knowledge then is made aware to us, and we integrate all of these experiences. We know who we are and who we've been, and we have conferences with other soul entities that are above us in a hierarchical way
yeah,
that describe where we need to learn other lessons, perhaps, and in time, whatever that time period is, we decide, okay, this is the next lesson I need to learn. Now, along with us learning that, we are intimately involved with all of these other spiritual essences that we have had in our mortal bodies.
yeah,
So other spiritual beings, theoretically, part of them are in the mortal body, and a
yeah,
very small part of them is still in the soul or ethereal world.
yeah,
Then we communicate with them, and they communicate with us to discuss and describe the next lessons we need to learn, and we choose the lesson we need to learn next time, and then we reincarnate
yeah,
in a body that will
yeah,
allow us to make that lesson real. That may be a person that's a good person. Maybe it's a good bad person. I think we have good experience and bad experiences as a learning experience. So we are good people, bad people. We are educated people. We are not educated people. We are all kinds of people from all kinds of worlds
yeah,
on Earth, and or all kinds of environments on Earth. And I believe that um, the next reincarnation, if I have one, needs to be maybe in a body that is so decimated that it's going to be a very painful experience. But it could be the other way around. I don't know. And then if I've elevated my knowledge base to a certain level, then I don't have to reincarnate any longer and move upward in this hierarchy of
yeah,
um, spirituality. I don't think it's any different than most organized religions where people believe they're going to die and see Jesus Christ, for example, or Muhammad, or what other so many other religions.
yeah,
They're all believing that
yeah,
the purity of the soul then moves
yeah,
eventually to the divine
yeah,
once it is that pure. I believe certainly in, I believe an ultimate power created this wonderful thing called you and me and this phenomenal Earth and maybe all the other planets in the cosmos. And I think that this is a phenomenal, huge um, awareness that we will eventually be part of. It's incomprehensible for me today to think in terms of that greatness. I mean, how big is big? You know, here's the Earth.
yeah,
Maybe there's Mars and Venus, but
yeah,
how big is big? And how many universes are there? And how many are all controlled by this one supreme
yeah,
knowledge base, God?
yeah,
Theoretically, if there is God, God is controlling everything.
yeah.
What an amazing thought process.
Yeah, I mean, three other questions have sprung just from what you've just said. I mean, the first thing is, do you think when the body finally turns off, do we retain some degree of consciousness as we travel from the body to this midlife place? That'd be one question. Another question would be, because I remember doing a past life regression with someone, and they believed they were a tree. Do you think we get to experience other life forms? And third question, I'll leave the third question to see how you respond to those two. Sorry.
Great question. I don't think that we, from all my reading, let's say Michael Newton's, because he's done so many interviews with people,
Yeah.
life between lives,
Yeah.
none of them have expressed being an inanimate object or another living structure
Yeah.
other than a human structure. That they have talked about being a human entity, the way we define human, on other planet systems,
Yeah.
but it doesn't talk about us being a rock or a tree or a hamster.
Okay.
It's still a human type entity.
Yeah.
That's what I've understood.
Okay.
Consciousness, I definitely believe our consciousness remains,
Yeah.
because how could we do past life experiences and experience that if there wasn't a conscious awareness of that entity? I mean,
Yeah.
I think the consciousness does survive.
Yeah.
It's just melding with all of the other consciousnesses, if that's a word, from all of our past lives. And it is now the total entity, the total being that we are, with all the knowledge.
Yeah.
I think maybe certain experiences, certain incarnations are more dominant than others.
Yeah.
Not each incarnation teaches us everything that we want to learn in that incarnation. Sometimes the bad things that we experience or that we do as a human are a learning process, and maybe we don't have that much consciousness about that experience because it's only to help us improve. I think the essence is to learn to love and give. I think all these wonderful things that have been written about in poetry over the centuries, I think these are the lessons that we are supposed to learn. I think the goodness is what's supposed to be learned, but you can't appreciate goodness if you don't understand badness.
Exactly.
So if you are only a good person, it is in the realm of only goodness, it doesn't relate well.
No.
But you need to understand what bad is to
Yeah.
know what good is.
Exactly.
And I think that's part of the reason that we maybe become bad people in different carnations.
Yeah.
I think we do have the power to be what we want to be, but I also think that there is an overwhelming lesson to learn. And if we're supposed to learn something that is not right to do, but we need to experience it, I think that needs to happen in a carnation and a incarnation for our learning process.
Yeah. You already answered the third question in the sense that I was going to suggest that the planet Earth is like an airport, and every day people are landing and people are taking off, and sometimes you go off to another planet system, or
Yes.
another possibly another universe, or certainly another galaxy where you live out a human type.
Why do we think that we are a people so unique to be inhabited on the only planet that can sustain life? And there are so many billions of Earths maybe out there. Why do we think we are so special that there can be no other life other than what is on this planet?
Exactly.
Just we don't know what we don't know. I don't deny it. Just have that possibility in your brain that we are just maybe a speck in this huge cosmos, and everything that's happening here may be happening on every single planet system out there. Maybe not Mars, I'm talking about other universes,
Exactly.
other galaxies. I
Exactly.
mean, how many are there? Who knows how to count them? It's just vast. And why do we think that we can be the only intelligent species in the universe? It makes no sense to me.
And given that we're talking about planets and universes, I mean, one of the obvious things to me is we choose to come here, we choose to come at a very given moment, and we choose to land into a body, well, there before arguably, but the point is our birth is to a particular set of parents or parent at a very precise moment in the history of the planet and in a specific location. Then align that to all the planets around. So astrology, as it's understood, is absolutely critical. It's like our thumbprint, which we're totally unique, and where we were born and when we were born is unique as well.
I agree.
So the whole astrological thing is something that's very worthwhile getting an understanding of too.
I don't understand astrology at all, but I certainly cannot discount the fact that we are only one part of a huge universe, and you can call astrology part of this huge universe, and we are energetic beings, and there are energy patterns not only within our body and within the earth. There are energy patterns within the universe. Certainly we all know that. Gravity, for example, all of these phenomenal things that we do know about, and so many more things that we don't even have an idea about. So the alignment of the planets, you know, it may sound like it's bizarre, but there are energy systems here that are at play. And maybe these energy systems are there for a purpose to create certain things happening to us. Why not? I mean, you may not believe it or understand it, but you must be intelligent enough to say, well, there may be a possibility that I just don't understand. Don't discount it as foo-foo and stupid talk. Just accept the fact that I don't understand it. It may be, but I don't understand it. And I may never understand it.
No, of course. And given that we talked about out-of-body experiences briefly, one of the things that we all engaged with on another one of the sessions that we did, you know, that you've been part of now 3 times, we did some distance healing by projecting our minds to someone somewhere on the planet. And that ability to take our consciousness, which we're already suggesting goes beyond this life, and this consciousness, which can have an out-of-body experience, can project accurately and do quite amazing work.
Let me tell you another interesting story. When I was at the Monroe Institute, one of the things that we did, not only to teach our brains to right hemisphere with the left hemisphere with frequencies, which was quite exciting in and of itself. We had guest speakers every night. This 20 or so people that were in the program and the instructors, and then a guest speaker. And one of the guest speakers was a military person who was involved with remote viewing. Do you know what that is? Remote viewing?
We did a bit of it in a course we did.
Wow. So that blew me away. Because it's very similar to the concept of distant healing, where an individual can project their mind and view something in a distant place. And this was actually done in the military. There were groups of people, secret tests that were done for remote viewing in other hostile governments, theoretically. And this ex-military person who had written a book about it, and I can't remember his name, talked about this, and it was quite fascinating. Quite fascinating.
There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a guy called Hal Puthoff did some work with the American Armed Forces doing distance viewing with amazing results. So I did some stuff around that in a course I used to teach as well. And I did Hemisync, which was come out of the Monroe Institute. I bought all the
Correct.
CDs and I listened to them, and that was quite
Yeah,
cool. Yeah,
yeah. Now that is amazingly relaxing.
yeah,
So you can have these headphones
yeah,
and recordings that have two different frequencies in the right ear and the left ear. This is what Hemisync is, and that
yeah,
was developed at the Monroe Institute.
yeah,
And those frequencies, theoretically, and I think it's been proven scientifically, balance the frequencies of the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain so that it puts you into a state of transcendental meditation. So from what I understand, to be trained in transcendental meditation could take years to accomplish. When you balance the frequencies of the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere, it can get you into that state literally in minutes.
that's right.
And that's what we were doing at the Monroe Institute. So 3 sessions a day, we literally went to our little cubicles. All of us had little cubicles where
Right,
we
yeah,
lived for
yeah,
that 2 weeks or 1 week. And we put on headphones and we had guided um, visualizations that were that were actually incorporating the hemisync frequencies that we didn't realize
yeah,
in
yeah.
our right and left ear headsets, so that it would put our brain into the state that we could then, with these guided visualizations, go into an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating. That I was able to do very well,
Yeah,
and it was fascinating.
yeah.
Um,
Like,
Amazingly relaxing and insightful,
yeah,
quite insightful. I
absolutely.
would tell you one experience I remember. I was laying in my cot, that we had these little cots. I was and we had structured visualization. So in the
Yeah,
beginning, it was very early and elemental, and then we got much more involved as the week progressed. And I don't remember where we were, but I was laying in my cot, and there was some visualization going on by me listening to my headphones with the hemisync signals, and I was looking at my belly, and I saw this huge golden ball emerge from my belly
yeah,
and just explode into the environment around me. And that was visualizing some of the chakras, I think it was.
yeah, yeah.
And what an exciting time. It was really an exciting time. If I were able, which I'm not, to travel because I can't, I would definitely go back to the Monroe Institute.
Yeah.
It was such an eye-opener, and I didn't know even what I was experiencing then. And now I can appreciate even more if I went back to have that experience again in that structured environment. That would be amazing. And I do know they have these still, because I've looked at the Monroe Institute
Yeah, yeah.
website, and they still have these sessions where you can apply and go. It's mind-blowing and mind-opening,
Yeah,
actually, is
yeah,
what it really is.
yeah, absolutely. A lot of the people who'll be watching this have done a lot of stuff with me as well, which is fascinating and interesting. And I can't divulge too much here because of contractual reasons and intellectual property reasons and all sorts of stuff. But I have got involved recently, and it will lead to working with a university and a highly intelligent guy, where we've actually witnessed using real hard science, um, getting the brain to the exact location where the connection's made, and we can see it scientifically.
Well,
Can't,
that's fascinating.
can't talk about it too much because of where we're at with the contract, but that's the next phase of work I'm getting into, which is
I
really,
think they're doing it at the Monroe Institute
yeah, they
also.
will be, they will be.
Yeah, I think, and that is mind-boggling too,
Yeah,
because now they're marrying the ethereal kind of spiritualness
yeah,
with the scientific method,
yeah,
and trying to prove things. I don't think science can prove all of this, obviously.
you know,
There's things that science will never, ever prove, and that's okay. But I think that they're able to look at different brain waves and a variety of other things and how it changes, and maybe certain types of cellular changes and electrical changes in the brain, because that's where the
Well,
soul more
where
than
I've
resides.
where I've been recently, which has been really helpful, is because we've got this science. People like engineers and potentially very left brain individuals are able to come over and begin to accept concepts that otherwise would be very difficult for them. But the
Yes.
science is in their face. So what I'm interested in is that there's a bunch of us who are sitting at the cutting edge of this, in using it in a business environment. And so anyway, so it's all exciting. It's just
Well,
unbelievable.
you're absolutely correct, and I think that because the research is getting more sophisticated,
Yeah.
more intellectual people are understanding the potential,
Yeah.
because quantum physics was just like a science fiction, and now it's a recognized
Yeah. Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Although we don't understand it completely,
Yeah.
it's a recognized process, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
uh, I'm very impressed with all of
So I'm thinking out loud here. I can see in a few weeks' time us having another session with someone else coming at this death and dying thing from a slightly different perspective, same belief system,
it.
same, but maybe coming at it from a different view. Um, but what's occurring to me is it would be pretty cool if we could do some kind of course thing where we combine ideas, and the guys who watch this, the men and women who watch this, and maybe others might want to partake of that.
Well, when I've done my reading, I've
Yeah,
only read the people that I think have credentials,
yeah, yeah.
like Brian Weiss, who's a medical doctor, and Michael Newton, who's a PhD hypnotherapist, Michael Ray Moody, which is with his books Life After Life. He's a medical doctor. So most of the readings I've done, Robert Monroe is not a medical person, but he has a lot of medical background. But
Yeah,
most of the people I've read have medical degrees that basically made them very conventional in their own world, but they now have opened their own box and can see outward, and they can interpret the esoteric and bring it into their more dedicated traditional learning
yeah,
processes.
yeah.
And it makes more sense to me because if these people can understand it and can relate it to me, it's more believable to me. Just a person, for example, that loves to write but has no background in medicine whatsoever, and they talk about past lives and hypnosis. I mean, it's all anecdotal, and I don't know that it's based on the science I know to be true, and
Yeah.
then go beyond that.
So, so, and I, everybody watching, just having just heard what you said, would totally respect that and understand that. The only thing I would say is that I've got over 30 years of doing this, but I'm not a doctor.
Oh, no, no, no,
And,
no. I'm not
well, I
saying
know
that
you're
you're
not.
not qualified to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm just saying when
yeah.
I've read, I've selected the books
Yes.
from people that have been conventional medical people that have been turned
Yeah,
into
yeah,
believers,
yeah,
because I wanted to see where their mindset was and
yeah,
how they got to the point where they believed in this more spiritual sense. And that helped me to take, because I'm a big conventional guy originally, and now I have this huge open mind that I can just
excellent.
allow this information to kind of be
So
absorbed.
I realise the time's banging on, but can I take you back, since you used the word again, spirit there and so on,
Hmm.
going back to the line for a moment, have you done any work on, like, Native American totems for animals in relation to what a line means to them? Have you any understanding of why it's the line? Was the line chosen because you said you love lines? Anything about that worth sharing? Just to
I think I see them as a graceful animal
yeah,
that is king of the jungle kind of
yeah,
story. This is my upbringing, when I saw The Lion King by Disney,
Mhm.
was such a satisfying movie. And, lions are these powerful beings that control the animal kingdom. I don't know how true that is, but that's how I envision it. And they're beautiful. They're graceful. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
The male lion is just a beautiful animal. So I don't know that there is anything other than that. It may be something that I've experienced in a past life that I don't remember at this point, which is okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I just don't know.
Yeah, I had the privilege of working and doing some of my stuff in Kenya, out on the plains, and we'd go up in the morning and the evening and go out and see the animals. And there's no doubt about it, when you come across the lion or lions, they just have a presence that no other animal has. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, I see that too.
Anyway, Al, is there anything else you'd like to say to the guys before we finish?
No, I mean, this is, I don't talk about my spirituality very much, although anybody that wants to hear about it, I am more than happy to divulge all of my beliefs. I, I am so comfortable with where I think I'm going
Yeah,
after this life,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I am not religious, so
Oh no.
I don't practice a religion whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah,
But I am very spiritual. I believe in an entity. We'll call that entity God.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I believe that that powerful being has created everything that's around us. And um, understanding and having a deep belief system that our spirit moves on
yeah.
and survives our mortal bodies is very comforting. And I never had that until that woman from the West Coast, I can't even remember her name,
Yeah,
got me to read a book called Many Lives, Many Masters that I was reluctant to read,
yeah,
yet
yeah,
turned my world around.
yeah,
I think that was a huge change in my life goals. And then all the other things that I've experienced in life that have been ups and downs, I think were learning lessons. But the next big challenge is this cancer that I'm dealing with
yeah.
over the last almost 2 years. And it's the biggest change in my lifestyle and my world. And my learning process is exponential after that diagnosis. So
Yeah.
I've learned about how it's going to feel to die, or at least as close as I could get to it.
Yeah.
And I've learned how I can repair my body by natural means.
Yeah.
And I don't believe, again, I'm curing anything. I'm just helping my body to heal. And I'm doing other things conventionally too. Don't get me wrong. I see a conventional oncologist
Yeah. Yeah.
once a month. I do some immunotherapy, which is not chemotherapy, but it's a process of human-derived monoclonal antibodies that supports my immune system that helps kill my malignant plasma cells. I do that, and I think that's very effective. But even if I did that, let me just tell you that there is research that will show that people that are candidates for immunotherapy, so everybody that has cancer is not a candidate, but if you're a candidate because of your cancer and whatever, immunotherapy is only successful maybe 20% to 25% of the time, and that's the ideal patient. And the reason is, from the research I read that is in medical journals, the reason is those that are successful have a healthy gut microbiome, and the far majority that are not the far majority are not successful, and the reason is they have dysbiosis in their gut. And I do believe we're a society of huge prevalence of dysbiosis in the gut, basically leaky gut. And that's the reason why chronic disease is where it is today.
Yeah.
That's why we live in a very unhealthy state. Our immune systems are shot. And by the way, I think that's the reason why COVID was able to do what it did to so many people, because our normal, innate, and adaptive immune systems are not functioning at peak performance because they're so overworked and overstressed because of chronic inflammatory issues that have actually decreased its ability to fight viruses, infections, and whatever.
So, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Al, I really, really can't thank you enough. I know they're going to love this evening when I show it.
Oh,
And I think
great.
I suspect I'll be back in touch with you again.
Oh, I love it.
But the thing is, I guess everyone's going to buy your 2 books. I'm certainly going to get them downloaded, and we'll look forward to the next publication. I know you.
Well, let me throw out something as a tease again, okay?
Do that.
So one of the things that I was doing over the last 2 weeks, I stopped just last Monday or whatever, last week. I was doing a continuous glucose monitor on myself.
Yeah.
You know what?
We're doing it, yeah.
So there is some really good research that shows glycemic variability, the ability for spikes or no spikes in your insulin level, the sugar level and the insulin obviously production during and after meals. That spike, that variability, that standard deviation from the norm tells a lot about your healthy immune system and or your ability to fight cardiovascular disease and other serious types of life-threatening diseases. And I will tell you, I have a report of my glycemic variability, and it's in the extremely healthy range. And so I'm writing a paper to publish on my website about the importance of the continuous glucose monitoring to test your glycemic variability. That's
been a big part of our recent weeks. So if you can let us know as soon as you've got that ready, I'll let people know and we can all look at it.
I will do that.
I'm going to have to go, unfortunately.
Go. I enjoyed this.
I'm coming back for you again. I know that already. Okay.
You have a great day. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Take care.
Cheers out. Thank you.